So there's videos on the internet that will actually tell you that there is no reason to go with the object-based sound formats. One of my favorites, and I'll try to re-find it and link a video here, actually has a gentleman that has disconnected all of his speakers whatsoever. And he is going back and just running his 4 height speakers. And his misconception of the of everything is that there was not enough sound coming from the 4 channels. And again, that is the misconception when it comes to these formats. This is not a channel-based format like the traditional 5.1 or 7.1 formats that exist. So you've got to remember, they are not trying to create constant sound coming from these speakers. It reminds me of going back to the early 2000s in home theater, when people thought if they weren't hearing constant sound from their back 2 channels, that something was wrong with their system, and they would check their wires, or they would try to figure out, go into the settings and try to turn the sound volume up on those 2 to get something to happen. And it was kind of comical when you would go back and talk to people, because those discrete sounds are not always going to be engaged. You're not always going to hear a bird flying across the ceiling. You're not always going to hear a plane taking off and flying across the screen. And in a rain, if it's raining outside, the sound of 2 characters walking outside or running through the rain to get inside a house, that the sound that you hear or you perceive between being in the house and hearing the impact of rain on a roof is different than being outside. So these are the types of things that they are trying to create, or one of the things that they are trying to create with these sound formats. The other thing is they're actually trying to move these objects anywhere in the room, which is why, theoretically you could have 26 speakers working together to place these sound images. But you got to take a step back and go back to when stereo sound began to be used, and the sound image itself, the speakers would be placed, and you would hear, on a good stereo system, you can hear what sounds to be the vocals coming from the center. Like that image, those 2 speakers work together to create what sounds to be, or what appears to be someone talking or singing or an instrument playing from the center of the image, while you could hear other instruments on the right and left. And ideally, that's what they're doing. They're using the entire array of speakers to create and place those sounds in different places. So you're not always going to hear, just because there's a gun battle or something taking place across the screen, you're not always going to hear sound all around you or over your head. So there's some movies that are going to be more enjoyable if you're just wanting to hear Atmos or DTS-X, or if you're wanting to hear an upscale of either of those 2 formats taking place. So that's one of the things you have to remember. And everybody goes to, the best demo disc, per se, is Gravity with Sandra Bullock. And although I do agree that it is one of the best examples of the sound format, especially when they're supposed to be in space and you can hear somebody all the way around you, the movement, of George Clooney's character and things like that taking place, really enjoyable. But then on something like, I think the scene that was being demoed on the gentleman that I was talking about, there was the gun battle in one of the scenes in The Matrix, and he didn't feel like there was enough sound across the top. And what I immediately thought of is there's a film called Shadow that exists, and if you haven't seen it, I haven't watched the whole movie, but I've seen enough of it to let you know that the Atmos in it is probably some of the best that I've ever heard, in the sense that they use it as the technology was meant to be used, not just for that plane flying overhead, but the way that the sound enwraps you and makes you think that you are experiencing the same thing as the characters. And the example that I use is, there's a scene early on in the film where you have three characters that are in a cave, and you feel like you are in a cave. You feel the pressure, and the movement, and the way you can hear water dripping in different places, and the way that water runs down, and even the sounds as the characters talk and the dialogue takes place, and the faint echoes that are taking place. You're in the cave. So the sound, that they're using that speaker array, that object-based sound, to create the environment exactly how it was intended to be done. So those are things that you need to look at. It's not just about like Alita Battle Angel, where you have a big machine driving over you, and you're like, oh wow, this machine just drove over me. Or I can't remember what film it was, but I remember there was like some helicopters or something like flying across. And yeah, I mean, they flew across and it was really neat, but that's only one way that technology is used. So when I hear people say, is it worth it to enjoy a film? I question if they really understand what the intention of that technology really is. It's not the classical 5.1 or 7.1 channel format. I mean, it's taking it to a different level. Object-based sound is a different level. So one of the things in this video that I want you to take away is, it is totally worth the upgrade to move into that format. Now, I've waited for 6 months of getting to demo different material to make this video and to talk about this, because I wanted to get a good, grouping of different films, some kids movies that are remastered that way, some action movies, some comedies and things, to see how different directors and studios have produced the content and used it in different ways. And there's some that are great and the technology is used perfectly, and then there's others that's not so great. So, I mean, I would say it's a hit and miss depending on what studio is working with it. But you take a director like James Cameron, with some of the work that's going to be coming out in the future, like the Avatar sequels and things like that, there's no doubt in my mind that technology is going to be used in a very, very positive light. So it's going to be very great. It's going to be very interesting to see what's going to take place in regards to that. So that's going to be a treat. But I definitely would say after having, between 6 or 7 months, having a full, full 4 ceiling speaker Atmos setup, it would be hard for me to go back after having those experiences. And the other thing that has really impressed me with, and I don't know if it's just the Marantz or the other components that you can buy do this as well, but the upscaling technologies, I'm amazed at, even like 2-channel, I think it was Flight of the Navigator, maybe. Flight of the Navigator, it's a 2-channel movie, and it was, when I was a kid, it was one of my favorite movies to watch. But the upscaling was phenomenal, and it really caught me off guard. So I think that even some of your older movies, you have the potential to hear them in a new light, even though they're not, they're not released in Atmos or DTS-X and things like that. So it's definitely worth taking a look at, to be sure. But those are just some thoughts. I may go into detail in the future, or if anyone has questions and things like that, in regards to that technology. Now, I did match my ceiling speakers, and I'll post in the comments the series that I got and things like that. But my ceiling speakers are Bowers & Wilkins to match my front channel speakers and also my surround speakers as well. I stayed all with Bowers & Wilkins. That's my preference. I've listened to a lot of speakers, and I'll truly tell you, I really think that it all depends on what you prefer. I've listened to Martin Logan's, you know, I've listened to some of the Definitive Technology speakers, and I really think it just depends on what you prefer. The first time I ever listened to Bowers & Wilkins speakers, their sound was different. For me, it felt like I was watching a movie like on a big IMAX system. It reminded me of when my parents, when I was a kid, and we'd go to the IMAX theaters. So that was my preference. So that's what I stayed with my ceiling speakers as well. And I was trying to match everything up as well as I could. And I don't believe the series that I have has the Kevlar. I don't think. I'll have to double check. I don't think they do, but with it being Atmos speakers, I wasn't really worried about that. And with DTS-X, they're more forgiving on your speakers if you don't equally match them across the board. That was another thing I was looking at as well. But I'm really happy with that. So for the rest of the video, I'm going to strictly focus on Emotiva, and I'll probably talk about the sound formats again in the future, maybe in a little bit more detail. But those are my initial thoughts and some things that just rub me the wrong way when I hear people talk about it, because the technology is definitely worth. If you are into the hobby and you have a home theater and you've invested any kind of time into it at all, invested any kind of money into it at all, it's definitely worth it, to be sure. And then you want to make sure that you power it correctly. I'm a big fan of separates for a multitude of reasons, and I will probably eventually make a video talking about that at some point in time when I get around to it. But anyway, so the rest of the video I'm going to focus on the Emotiva A500 Bass X amplifier. But those are my initial thoughts as far as installing the in-ceiling speakers and the definite enjoyment factor that it's added to the system. And for me, one of the treats that I get is when I see my kids look around or say, "Dad, I heard it," or we see the difference. That's really neat. And so I enjoy that. So those are my initial thoughts. Okay, so we're looking at the Emotiva A500. It's a 5-channel power amplifier. And I'll have to tell you, it is one of the best amplifiers that I've personally come in contact with over the last 20 years of being in this hobby. And I'll tell you, I've went through a lot. Early on, I would say my first 5 years in the hobby, had a lot of Onkyo receivers, and I kept looking for an opportunity to upgrade. Eventually, I found myself in with Marantz, and then I moved into the Marantz preamp path, and I moved to the Emotiva brand, and I went with Sherborne because I was able to get all channels driven at 150 watts per channel, and that's how I got introduced to the Emotiva brand. And I stayed in their X series, but when I was getting ready to add Atmos speakers, what I was looking at was, how can I get into this cost effectively? I had the open, I had the opportunity for the expansion because my pre-pro had the existing channels set up. And then the other thing that I had was, I already had 7 channels that were driven at 150 watts. And so I kept going back and forth because originally I was looking at Outlaw amplifiers because there was one that was matched up and it was in the price point. I didn't know a lot about them, but I had read that their performance was really at a good place. And so I was getting ready to pull the trigger and see how that matched up. And then I just kept going back and forth, mainly because what I thought about was, how much is really going to be pushed, how much power is really going to be pushed to these four ceiling speakers. And so, because of my familiarity around the Emotiva brand, and I am a brand loyalist when I find something I really like, especially when I have really good customer service, which Emotiva had always provided as well. Some of their components and things like that I bought, as far as their wires and connectors and things like that, I've always had a really good experience with as well. So I was like, I'm gonna go ahead and give this a chance. And then if I'm not happy with it, or if I don't feel like it has the power performance that I need, and 80 watts per channel, I mean, come on, from a ceiling, how high is that ceiling? That was the other thing I was looking at. How high is the ceiling? Am I really going to be listening to this at full reference levels? If there's, between 1 and 4 people in the room. That was the other question I was asking. Is just like, do I want to be deaf by the in the next 10 years? And so I was like, I'm going to give this a chance. So I picked it up. And one of the things that I found out was, if I was if I had a audio video receiver, me personally, and if I was going to have a 7-channel system, I would go with this. I would go ahead and buy this as an addition, and I would run my left and right speakers from that, because most of those are rated at 2 channels driven anyway, and most of your power is going to be output to those 2 speakers. And then I would run the rest of my speakers to this amplifier. That should give you enough headroom for those dynamic bursts, that you're going to get, or those peaks that you're going to get from time to time. In most cases, for your smaller to small, mid-sized home theaters, and you should be really happy with that. And that's just food for thought. But in regards to a Atmos setup or DTS-X, I would say that you are going to be extremely happy with this. You're going to get all the power that you could ever need because of the power supply that this unit provides. And that's one of the things that I would say about Emotiva that they've always been great about, is providing the power supply that's going to give you exactly what you need. Also, regardless of which country that you are in, the power rate requirements, as far as if you need the 115 or the 230 at 50 or 60 hertz, is going to be automatically detected and switched, provided that you put the right power cord in there. You can't plug the wrong cords in, and per whatever country that you're in, you should have that information. So again, make sure that you attach the right power cord, but the unit itself automatically detects the voltage, which is again, that's awesome for them. You're seeing more and more people do that in the consumer electronics market, which should have been that way a long time ago. And then the unit unboxed weighs in at almost 27 pounds. So think about that again from a capacity standpoint. When I love when people tell me they've got like 1,000 watt receiver and it weighs like 5 pounds. And it's laughable. Now I know that you can have like Class H amplifiers and things like that, but still a well-maintained, built machine is going to be just a rule of thumb to look at in regards to that. So that's something to take a look at as well. But overall, the unit looks beautiful. The industrial design is just spot on. This thing looks like it is worth a lot more money than what you're going to actually invest in it. The sound quality is great. And then if you're not happy with it, send it back. But demo this unit for sure, because I'll be surprised if you are in a smaller to mid-small sized home theater. This is going to provide the power that you need for a lot of those situations. And to run 4 ceiling speakers for most people, I would be shocked that it wouldn't be ideal for most speakers, especially depending on what you're using for those ceiling speakers. Me personally, what I ended up underpowering is the Bowers & Wilkins Performance Series CCM 684s. And these are actually a 8-inch fiberglass or glass fiber woofer with a 1-inch soft dome tweeter. And the sensitivity is 89 dB, and the recommended amplifier power is anywhere from 25 to 130 watts. So I was not concerned with underpowering these speakers at all. And it was a good matchup, and I've been very happy with that. So I'll look at providing some links, but you should see pictures of this as well if you're watching this video stream on YouTube. But anyway, those are some initial thoughts on that. I'm very happy with the unit. It's totally meeting the needs. And if you watched any of the video clips leading up to what you're listening to right now, then you know how I feel about the experience with Dolby Atmos or DTS-X and the addition that this will give your sound system. And I really think at these price points, $529, or if you go to Emotiva's website, they have the A700, which gives you the 7 channels for, I believe it is going for right at $599 right now, which is it's listed at, normally goes for $629, but it's going for $599 right now. So you could get the same thing as the A500, but get 7 channels. It's going as a closeout right now, so I'd head over there and pick that up if you were looking at needing just the 2 height channels or your 2 Atmos channels. If you weren't going to do all 4 on your ceiling, depending on your setup, then if you had a amplifier, or if you had a 7 channel, then this is you add another 7 channel, that's going to give you more than enough channels as far as amplification is concerned to drive, that 11 channel system that you're looking at. Anyway, food for thought. I hope you're enjoying these videos. I'm trying to make them informative, but not trying to just push you in one direction or the other. These are all opinions at the end of the day. Go with what you like. That's the key. You know what speakers you like. You know what sound equipment that you like. Go to your stores, demo it. What you can get as an in-home demo, do your in-home demos. At the end of the day, though, make a decision that you are happy with, because there's nothing worse than finally buying the equipment, putting it together, and then not being happy with the end result. So go with, your ears better than anybody else, so go with what you really believe to be the best sounding system, and don't worry what anybody else thinks, because you are going to be the one that's going to be listening to your system more than 90% of the time, most likely. And with that, we're out.